Birch Lake is located in north-central Minnesota, about 180 miles north of Minneapolis and St. Paul. The lake has 1,283 acres of water area and about 14 miles of shoreline, ranging from sandy beaches to floating bogs. The lake is bordered on the east by a small town by the name of Hackensack. In fact, it is so small we have our entering and leaving sign on the same post. The town evolved from the early logging days when Paul Bunyan, the giant mythological lumberjack, and his blue ox babe reigned over the state of Minnesota. His sweetheart, Lucette Diane Kensack, and her son Paul Jr. still stand here on the shore of Birch Lake, proudly casting a surveying eye over the city. In 1997, Sybil Neese and Shirley Johnson applied for a grant for the Birch Lake Association to conduct a study of Birch Lake.
$4,000 was to come from the DNR and matched by another $4,000 from the Birch Lake Association. And the work was to include more than just this particular boat tour.
Association members collected materials already completed by the various agencies. These included watershed, soils, lake area and depth, critical habitat, critical wetlands, hill shade, and ownership of properties around the lake. The Lake Association had already studied aquatic plants in the Boy River between Birch and 10 Mile Lakes. The DNR completed an aquatic plant study of the two basins of Birch Lake. They also helped set up a study of walleye spawning areas and panfish nesting sites that was completed by association members. The DNR contributed a count of fish populations. All of this data was mapped to be used as a base study for future project evaluation.
Our thanks to the Minnesota DNR, the Soil and Water Conservation Service, and the Cass County Land Department for assisting with the study. And to David and Ramona Bond for furnishing the printing and the publishing of the brochure. In addition to the other phases of the study, 10 demonstration sites were established by volunteers. A brochure was printed so those interested in visiting the sites can take this self-guided tour. The brochures are available at the Chamber of Commerce building near the city wharf. The sites have all been numbered so they can be easily located from the water. We will begin our boat tour here at the Chamber of Commerce building. Dick Smith, a local Birch Lake resident, will help explain the various demonstration sites.
Here we are at site number 1, the Butterfly Garden in Shoreland Plantings. This site shows some of the best management practices. The plants and flowers in the garden have been chosen to attract butterflies and birds. Notice the shrubs and trees planted next to the Chamber of Commerce building. They have been placed here to keep the site more natural looking from the lake. The juniper near the water's edge holds the soil and prevents erosion. Best management practices can result in a site that looks attractive from the lake and also from the land. Here we have an example of the beautiful part of the garden all set up for fall with marigolds and zinnias. Lila Forsberg, Gordon Friday, and Shirley Johnson planned and developed this site as a starting point for this boat tour. Our boat tour will now take you over to site number 2.
And this old turtle that was lurking nearby said, "Hey, I hear you're saving habitat for me too. I'd like to see it. Can't I ride along? I'm getting too old to swim that far."
This site demonstrates how a shoreline left as natural as possible can be a best management practice and help protect the quality of the lake.
Gene and George Crick come to the lake to relax and enjoy their leisure time and do not want to be bothered with yard maintenance.
The area near the road entrance has been revegetated with shrubs and wildflowers. They do not mow the area bordering the shoreline or disturb the seawall. Seawalls such as this one prevent runoff from the land into the lake. A cabin on this type of site can be nestled into the hill and be hardly visible from the water. The trees which have fallen naturally are left undisturbed for wildlife habitat. As they deteriorate, the soil benefits from the decay. A very narrow access has been cleared to the lake, and only the poison ivy has been completely eradicated. Leaving shoreline in a natural state saves endless hours of labor and contributes significantly to the aesthetics of the lake. You might consider leaving part of your shoreline in a natural state, which would provide a pleasant living environment. We will now move on to Site 3. Site 3. This track is a long, narrow peninsula extending into Little Birch Lake from the east shore and not suitable for development. This peninsula was acquired through a land exchange initiated by the Cass County Land Commissioner's Office in the mid-1970s. It was placed in the county memorial forest status to preserve it in its natural state. This site will be monitored over the years to assess changes in the shoreline and effects on the water quality which occur naturally. We go on now to Site.
Doug Hoopman is coordinator for site number 4. Says he's happy to take part in the program, help protect the lake, and make an environmentally sound community.
Doug Hoopman is a demonstrator for site number 4. When he built this permanent home on Birch Lake, he had 2 landscape goals in mind. He wanted a yard that was private, but also open so he could enjoy it. But he also wanted to keep a natural shoreline. The lower shelf has been left with the original trees and undergrowth. The upper yard is a grass lawn with low-growing juniper planted on the shelf to prevent erosion. Side yard plantings have been put in for privacy, which also attract birds and other wildlife. At the lake, only a minimum width has been used for dock and boat lift. Bulrushes and other vegetation have been left to improve water quality and provide fish habitat.
Now we'll move on to site number 5.
Site number 5. This site, developed by the Bruce Lees, could be called the cabin with 2 views. It is difficult to see the cabin from the lake through the natural shoreline that has been preserved, but the view from the cabin still provides an adequate way to enjoy the beauty of the lake. The shoreline is protected from eroding wave action by bulrushes and other aquatic vegetation. Old trees which fall into the water add to the aesthetics and provide habitat for fish and other lake inhabitants. This site demonstrates best management practices with little impact on the lake as a result of development. We will now move on to Site 6, where the David Bonds are building their new lake home. Here we are at site number 6. David and Ramona Bond have prepared this home site and have begun building their home on Birch Lake. As with most other sites you have viewed, the trend is to leave the shoreline in a natural state as much as possible. The Bonds plan little shoreline disturbance between the lake and the cabin. The Cass County Environmental Services and DNR Fisheries evaluated the site and approved the building location. The Bonds have applied for and received all the necessary permits prior to building. When completed, the cabin will have very little visual impact from the lake due to the preservation of the natural shoreline. And now we'll move on to Site 7. Site number 7. How do you get to open water if there is marshland in front of your lake home? Only a very narrow swath should be opened through the marsh, and all traffic should be encouraged to stay in this pathway. This practice has less of a negative impact on the aquatic vegetation. The Fred Nass site, formerly owned by Bill and Artis Quinn, has a floating dock with a boardwalk leading from the shore to the dock. The boardwalk is permanent and has little impact on the aquatic plants. The floating dock is suspended on steel uprights that allow it to rise and fall according to the variation in the water levels of the lake. The area between the shore and the home has been planted with shrubs and trees to create a better visual impact and provide habitat for wildlife. The Fred Nasses enjoy being here on Birch Lake and appreciate the good work that the Quinns have done in managing their lakeshore. The Nasses plan to continue this great effort. Here we are at Site 8, near the Big Island, where we can find some bulrushes. Bulrushes occur at several places on Birch Lake. They help to control wave action and erosion and provide habitat for fish. Ducks, geese, and other water birds also seek refuge in bulrushes. You can help in the preservation of this wildlife by not driving watercraft through patches of bulrushes and destroying them. We'll now leave the bulrushes and go on to Site 9. Here we are at Site 9. Shirley Johnson planned a natural buffer zone to attract birds and wildlife. Wildflowers native to the area have been planted among the trees and shrubs. Here you will see an attractive mix of shrubs such as highbush cranberry, serviceberries, hackberries, mountain ash, nannyberries, red-twig dogwood, hosta, pachysandra, daylilies, and wildflowers. Fertilizer used on the grass does not contain phosphorus, which would promote unwanted weeds in areas of our lake where they would not naturally occur. And now we'll move on to the last site, Site 10. Here we are at Site 10. Plantings on a bluff like this keep the soil in place. This site demonstrates how Lila Forsberg and Gordon Friday planted shrubs and low-growing trees on a bluff to hold the soil in place. Red-twig dogwood, mountain ash, wild plum, and crabapple, and low-growing junipers hold the soil in place on the face of the bluff. All plantings are done so they don't obstruct the view from the house.
This concludes our boat tour. We hope that you will be able to adopt some of these best management practices and apply them to your lakeshore.